Hope in the prison. John was a quiet man with a kind heart. He lived in a small, cold cell in the prison. The walls were grey, and the days felt very long. Many prisoners felt hopeless, but John was different. He always wore a smile on his face, no matter the day. Every morning, John would greet the other prisoners. "Good morning. How are you today?" he asked. Some prisoners ignored him, while others looked at him with confusion. But after some time, more prisoners began to smile and greet him back. His simple words made a difference. At night, when the prison was quiet and dark, John would sit in the corner of his cell and tell stories. He talked about the sea, about tall trees, and about the stars in the sky. The prisoners gathered around him, listening carefully. For a few minutes they forgot the cold walls and their sad thoughts. One evening a young man named Peter came to John and asked, "Why do you smile, John? Don't you feel sad in this place?" John looked at Peter, and his eyes were full of kindness. "I smile because I believe in hope," he said softly. "No matter where we are, hope can make us strong." John's words gave the prisoners something to hold on to. They started to talk to each other more, share their food and help one another. John's hope was like a light in the dark. It made them feel better, even in such a sad place. John often said, "This place cannot hold our dreams. Keep your heart free, and one day we will see the sun together." His words became a promise to the prisoners. They started to believe that no matter how hard life was, hope would always bring them strength. The days in the prison were hard. The guards were strict, and the food was not good. But the prisoners began to change. They worked together and helped each other. They began to trust John's words. Every day, John found new ways to lift their spirits. One morning the prison was full of noise. The prisoners were loud and many were angry. The guards shouted at them, and some prisoners were pushed to the ground. John saw the chaos and walked toward the middle of the room. He raised his hand and said, "Everyone stop! We are better than this." His voice was calm but strong. The room grew quiet. The prisoners looked at John. "We are not enemies," he said. "We are people. We must help each other, not fight." Slowly, the prisoners began to listen. They stopped shouting and helped the fallen prisoners up. John walked around the room, talking to everyone. He reminded them of their strength. "We are not alone," he said. "We are a family here." The prisoners started to nod and smile. John's words made them believe in themselves again. At night, they gathered together in the corner of the room. They sat on the cold floor and shared stories. Some talked about their families, while others shared dreams of the future. They laughed, and for a moment they felt free. John looked at the prisoners, happy to see their smiles. Peter, the young man, came to John again. He looked different now. His face was softer, and his eyes were filled with hope. "Thank you, John," Peter said. "You showed us that there is light in the darkest places." John smiled back and said, "You are the light, Peter. We all are. Together, we make the light stronger." The next day something special happened. The guards came to John. "We need your help," one of them said. John was surprised. "What do you need?" he asked. The guard explained that there had been problems in another part of the prison. Some prisoners were fighting, and the guards could not stop them. John thought for a moment. "I can help," he said. He walked to the area where the fighting was happening. The other prisoners were angry and shouting at each other. John stepped into the middle of them. He raised his hand and spoke calmly. "Stop! This fighting does not help anyone." The prisoners paused and looked at John. "We all want the same thing. Peace, not fighting," he continued. "Fighting only makes things worse. We must find another way." Slowly, the prisoners started to listen. They put down their fists and sat down. John spoke to them for a while, explaining how fighting only made their lives harder. He talked about the future, how they could make their lives better if they worked together. The prisoners were quiet. They thought about what John said. Soon the guards came back. They looked surprised. "What did you do?" one of them asked. John smiled. "I just reminded them that we can be better than this," he said. The guards left and John returned to the other prisoners. That evening, the mood in the prison was different. The prisoners were calmer and more peaceful. They worked together, and there was no more fighting. They remembered John's words, and it made them feel strong. John sat in the corner, feeling proud. He had made a difference. The prison was still dark and cold, but now it was a little brighter because of the hope he had brought. The days passed, and John continued to bring hope to the prison. Every morning he spoke with the other prisoners. He told them stories of good things that could happen if they stayed strong and worked together. Slowly, more and more prisoners started to change. They stopped fighting and began to help each other. One day, a new prisoner arrived. His name was Mike. He was angry and scared. He had been in trouble before and he didn't trust anyone. When John met Mike, he saw the fear in his eyes. Mike didn't speak to anyone and he spent his time alone. John decided to talk to Mike. He sat next to him one evening and said, "I know you are scared. I know it is hard here, but we can make things better." Mike looked at John with a cold stare. "How?" Mike asked. "We are in prison. There is no way out." John smiled and replied, "The way out is not always through the doors. Sometimes the way out is in your heart. If you have hope, you can always find a way." Mike didn't say anything at first, but he listened to John's words. Slowly, he started to open up. Over the next few days, Mike began to talk to other prisoners. He stopped sitting alone and started to join the group. John's hopes spread through the prison like a small spark turning into a big fire. The prisoners began to work together more. They shared food, helped each other, and became a stronger community. Even the guards noticed the change. One guard came to John and said, "I don't know what you are doing, but it is working. The prison is calmer now. The prisoners are not fighting as much. What do you say to them?" John smiled and replied, "I just tell them the truth. We can always choose hope over fear." That night, as John sat alone in his cell, he felt a deep sense of peace. The prison still had many problems, but he knew that the hope he had brought was real, and that hope was stronger than any walls around him. As time went on, John's words continued to inspire the prisoners. One day, the prison warden noticed the positive change. The prison was quieter and the fights had stopped. The prisoners were more cooperative and the guards were less stressed. The warden decided to speak with John. He asked, "What is your secret? Why is the prison so different now?" John smiled and said, "There is no secret. It is about hope and kindness. If people feel cared for, they will change. We all need a little hope." The warden thought for a moment and nodded. He said, "You have done something incredible here. I don't know if I can fully understand it, but it is working. The atmosphere in the prison has changed." John felt proud but humble. He didn't do it for the praise. He did it because he knew that hope could change lives. He continued to speak with the prisoners every day, helping them to see the good in themselves and in others. One afternoon, Mike came to John with a big smile. "I have decided," Mike said. "I want to change. I want to leave this place better than I found it." John was happy to hear those words. "That's the spirit," he said. "You can start by helping others just like you were helped. Together, we can create a better future." Mike nodded, and from that day on, he became one of the leaders among the prisoners. He helped John spread the message of hope and peace throughout the prison. Over the next few months, the prison became a place of calm. The prisoners worked together, and the guards noticed the difference. John had made a real impact. One morning, the warden came to John and said, "You have done something extraordinary here. We are considering reducing your sentence because of the change you have brought to this prison." John was surprised but grateful. He had never expected anything in return. "Thank you," he said softly, "but the real reward is seeing the change in the people around me." As the years passed, John's message of hope continued to live on. Even after he was released, he never forgot the lessons he learned in prison. He knew that no matter where you are or what you are going through, there is always hope, and that hope can change the world. After John was released from prison, he returned to the small town where he had grown up. People in the town knew about his time in prison, but they didn't know about the changes he had helped make there. John didn't talk about it much. Instead, he focused on helping others. John started working at a local shelter for people who had fallen on hard times. He was able to share the lessons he had learned in prison, that kindness and hope could change lives. Many of the people at the shelter were angry or sad, but John always treated them with respect. One day, a young man named Tom came into the shelter. He was in his 20s, and he seemed lost. He had just gotten out of jail, and he didn't know what to do with his life. John spoke to him quietly. "You have a second chance now. You can make it count." Tom listened. He had heard many people tell him that before, but something in John's voice made him believe it. He started working hard at the shelter, helping the others, and slowly he began to change. John kept working with people like Tom, showing them that they could change. Slowly, the town started to notice the difference in John. He wasn't the same man who had been locked up. He had become someone who helped others see their potential. Years later, when John looked back at his life, he realized that prison had been a turning point. He had been through many hard times, but those times had shaped him into someone who could bring hope to others. John knew that the world was full of challenges, but he also knew that no one was ever truly lost. There was always a way to find hope, no matter how dark the path seemed. As he stood in the small town, surrounded by people who had found hope again, John smiled. He had done what he set out to do. He had changed lives, and that was more than he ever dreamed of. Hope had the power to change everything.